The reason that a believer should be obeying the law of God is so that the world will see what a glorious God we have. So when the world sees believers loving one another and doing all the things that the law of God says, not killing, not stealing, not committing adultery, all that, they will look and say, oh, look at what a great God this people have. Hi, we are looking at how to discover the gospel in every single book of the Bible. And what we're looking at is each book, and we're asking the question, what's the book about? How does it fit in or move along the biblical storyline? How does it point us to the gospel of grace, and how does it point us to Jesus himself? So, first of all, let's talk about the book of Deuteronomy and what it's about. Now, the word Deuteronomy means the second law, deutero, which is second, nomos, law. And it is talking about the fact that when the children of Israel got to the promised land and were about to go in, God had told Moses that because of his various failures, he was not going to lead the children of Israel into the promised land. And so when they got to the very threshold of it, Moses preached, basically. If you take a look at the book of Deuteronomy, you realize it's really a series of Moses' sermons on recapitulating the law of God, especially the Ten Commandments that was received at Mount Sinai 40 years earlier, and going through what the law of God is and how to live in the land and the purpose of the law. And so what you actually have is a recapitulation of how to live life according to God's moral rules and law just before they go into the promised land. That's what it's about. And the outline of the book is fascinating because what many people have pointed out is that in 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years before the time of Christ, when the Hittites, which was a great empire, would conquer a smaller country, they would create a covenant between the emperor of the great lord and the vassal state. In other words, if a particular country was conquered and now they were going to be living under the Hittites, what was the relationship going to be like? And they would put together what was called a Hittite suzerainty treaty, because a suzerain was a lord. The Hittite suzerainty treaty. What's fascinating is the book of Deuteronomy is outlined exactly like a Hittite suzerainty treaty. It starts with the preamble, who are the parties? The Lord and his people. It moves into a place called the historical prologue, where the relationship between God and his people is spelled out, how God led them out of Egypt and how God made these promises and that sort of thing. Then comes the stipulations, which is actually the law. When you see the stipulations, it's the Ten Commandments. But in the Hittite suzerainty treaty, the law was not a way to be saved. It was a way to have a good relationship with the great Lord. So the people were doing what the great Lord wanted them to do, so they could have a good relationship, a love relationship with the great Lord. And then finally, after the preamble, the historical prologue, the stipulations or the law, and finally the blessings and curses came, which is where the great Lord said, if you obey the law, these are the blessings you will get, and if you disobey the law, these are the curses that will come down on you. And finally, at the very end, there would be oaths that both the great Lord and the vassals would have oaths. What's fascinating is, by Deuteronomy using that as the actual outline. So you basically have chapter 1 is the preamble, chapter 1 to 4 of Deuteronomy is the historical prologue, chapters 5 to 11 is the stipulations, and then chapters 12 to 26 is the details of the stipulations, meaning the law. Chapters 27, 28 are the blessings and curses, and then the oaths and witnesses are 29 to 31. that was revolutionary. Because first of all, it was showing that the relationship of Israel to God, that the purpose of the law was not to be saved, but to have a good relationship with God. The reason we are obeying the law of God is to have a love relationship with Him, not in order to be saved, not in order to go to heaven. The relationship had already been established by God. The deliverance had already happened. And the other reason, and Deuteronomy 4 is very clear, the other reason we obey the law of God is to be a witness to the nations. Deuteronomy 4 says the reason that a believer should be obeying the law of God is so that the world will see what a glorious God we have. So when the world sees believers loving one another and doing all the things that the law of God says, not killing, not stealing, not committing adultery, all that, they will look and say, oh, look at what a great God this people have. So all religion sees the law of God as being basically a way of salvation, a way you get God to bless you, a way to get God to just do good things for you. But Deuteronomy is an extraordinarily sophisticated way of saying, no, the law of God is there in order to have a love relationship with God, and also as a way of being a witness to the nations, not as a form of salvation. Now, of course, immediately you begin to see, how does that fit in with the rest of the Bible? Now, what that means, of course, is it's pointing to the fact that in the end, Jesus Christ saves us by giving us the blessings of the covenant by taking the curses of the covenant. It says so in Galatians chapter 3. It says Jesus Christ became a curse for us so that we could receive the blessings that were promised. At the end of Jesus' life, He obeyed the covenant perfectly. He should have gotten blessings. Instead, He got the curse. So that at the end of our lives, we get the blessings instead of the curse. He got our curse so that we get His blessings. And if you don't understand Deuteronomy, you do not understand how Jesus Christ's life and death actually brings about our salvation. The other thing, just to mention rather briefly, is about the way in which God shows that salvation is by grace. There's a great place in Deuteronomy 7 where God says to the children of Israel, I didn't love you because you were the greatest of nations. You were actually a small nation. I didn't love you because you were the richest of nations. You're actually a pretty poor nation. I didn't love you because you were a powerful nation. You're actually pretty weak. But I loved you because I set my love on you. And that's the reason I love you. I'll never forget Dr. Ed Clowney preaching a sermon on this passage in which he said, do you realize what God is saying? He's saying, let me tell you the reason I love you. I love you just because I love you. I don't love you because you're better or because you've done this or you've done that. I just love you because I love you. See, that's grace. And I remember Ed Clowney saying, then he says, men, the next time your wife says, honey, do you love me? Don't say, well, you're a great tennis partner. Don't say, well, you're actually pretty good looking. Or don't say, well, it was great to be able to put our two incomes together. He said, boy, that's not love. That's not love. When you love somebody because they're this or that, or they've brought you this or no. Real love is, I love you just because I love you. And God's love is the love of grace. It's not the love of merit for good works. One more thing. Jesus Christ is the ultimate lawgiver. Moses, of course, gave us the law, and he wrote it, on tablets. Jesus Christ is the ultimate lawgiver because he writes it on the tablets of your heart. It's very clear by the end of the book, by the way. At the end of the book of Deuteronomy, Moses gives them a song to sing in which the song says, we failed. Basically, at the end of Moses' life, he says, you know what? Here's the way God wants you to live. Here's how you can be a witness to the nations. Here's how you can have a great relationship with God. And you are going to fail. You are absolutely going to fail. So, boy, that's pretty pessimistic. Well, yes and no. Because Deuteronomy points forward to the fact that Moses was a great man. The meekest man on the face of the earth. He was a great man in many ways, but he was an insufficient lawgiver. We need a lawgiver who can write it on the tablets of our hearts, who can change us, and Jesus Christ is the one who did that. And actually, you're never going to actually, commandment number, if you go to the fourth commandment, you're never really going to get Sabbath rest unless you get the deeper rest that Jesus Christ brings you in the gospel. You're never going to really, number 5, honor your parents unless you get the fatherly love that really, really comforts you in Jesus Christ. You're never going to really be able to get over hatred and bitterness and really forgive unless you get the forgiveness that Jesus Christ gives us. You're never really going to be true to your spouse unless Jesus is your ultimate spouse and you get his spousal love, and then that'll keep you from ever being tempted to look for love anywhere else. Did you see? In other words, the reason why you can not kill, not commit adultery, not steal, the reason you cannot steal is because Jesus Christ has made you wealthy in himself, so that now you're not greedy for money. In fact, you can give it away. Jesus Christ is the ultimate lawgiver who not only writes it on our hearts, but actually gives us the resources we need to satisfy the law of God. And so Jesus Christ is the true Moses, and that's the way we can be absolutely sure that when we embrace the law of God, that we are going to be able to honor God, be a witness to the nations, and know him well.